Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. I'm your host, Joey Powell. We are brought to you by Johnny Tshirt. All right, we're glad you made us a part of your podcast listening and or viewing habits. Coast to Coast, here with you as always. Appreciate you subscribing. If you have not subscribed yet, please go ahead and make that happen. I will pause for a second, allow you to do so. Do, 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 do. Little girl from Ipanema, faux elevator music for you there. Hope you have indeed subscribed so you get all the Inside Carolina goodness to you, however it is that you consume your podcast. All right. So without further ado, let's get rolling. Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan are here with me as always. We know that you guys are here to hear more about UNC basketball, recruiting, et cetera, et cetera. Guys, we'll start here. Nick Timberlake visited UNC last week, and then the dead period happened, and crickets. Sherrell, anything to add there?
No, I took an official visit to UNC. Of course, you know how all these go. Everybody says, "Oh, it went well," and I guess the thought is it went well. No commitment was rendered while he was on campus, and now we're trying to see kind of what his next steps are. If he takes another visit, that's not great for UNC because it shows that he's, still very open. It doesn't mean that he wouldn't go to UNC, just that he's open to other schools. So we'll see what happens coming out of the dead period, which is only a 3-day span because immediately after this dead period, there's a 3-day open window, and then there's another dead period, and then things pick back up. So we'll just kind of see where he stands in the next week. But visit to UNC, only visit he's taken, only visit he has scheduled at this moment.
Name those dates for me, Sherrell. What day does the current dead period end? And then
So
what day does the next one start?
so it ends on Thursday. You're gonna have me lying. I should have looked this up before. It ends on Thursday, I think, which is I'm stalling for time. This is really bad radio. Okay, so
April the
uh
5th. April the
it
5th is Wednesday. April the 6th would be Thursday.
yeah, so it ends on Thursday at noon, and then a new dead period starts on the 10th, and it goes from the 10th through the 13th. And then I guess that is Friday the 14th, I believe it is when visits will really open back up again for a while.
All right. So everybody listen out there, in absence of information, just recognize there's not a lot likely to happen, at least that Sherrell and Inside Carolina can report during these dead periods because they are dead periods. It doesn't mean things aren't happening, but it means there's the likelihood of new things developing is incredibly low. Something that did happen this past weekend is the Geico Nationals. We teased it a couple of weeks ago on the show about it's basically the showcase for all of the top basketball teams and prep teams in the country playing together in one big event. Got to pour one out for my favorite name of a prep school ever, Prolific Prep, as they were upset early in the first round. But meaningful to Tar Heel fans and listeners of this show. Final game, the national or the championship, where I guess it's the de facto national championship, pitted Elliot Cadeau against Zayden High. Cadeau, of course, is a member of the 24 class right now. Zayden High out of AZ Compass, as it says in their uniforms, out of Compass Prep. He was playing against Elliot Cadeau and Cadeau's friends at Link over in Missouri. Sean, you watch this. You've got some stats. Hit us up, man. What jumped out at you about these performances? Because just from layman's terms on the social medias and on the message boards, Elliot Cadeau got some attention this week in all of the right ways.
Well, before we get there, and I'm going to go off the top of my head, so I will need to look this up afterwards and I can be fact checked. But the Geico National Championships, I believe the first year was held at Georgetown Prep High School in Washington, D.C., which I believe it was 2009. UNC was getting ready to play in the Final Four, and Avery Bradley was the big name, and I think he played so well it made ESPN put him above John Wall in their rankings
Mm.
that year in terms of a few very good defensive games. And I think Josh Shelby was another big time name in that one. So these events have come a long way. Now they're being held down in Fort Myers, Florida, where City of Palms is held. So it's crazy that this has been going on that long, but funny to think back many years ago when I was just sitting in the high school stands watching one of these. But in terms of what's relevant this year, yeah, Elliot Cadeau put on really a 3-day show as Link Academy went on to win the championship. Beating, they beat Paul VI the first game and finished off beating Zayton High's Arizona Compass team in the final game. And really, it was the first game that that jumped out. It was 2 points, but it was 14 assists, which I think unless you're Marquise Noel, is pretty much unheard of right now. But that really continued on. The second game, he had a really good scoring effort, 16 points, was still able to really a double-double, 16 points, 10 assists. And then the championship game, 11 points, 5 assists. So, he really made his mark. I think the vision, you can see it on any of the highlight tapes that have been circulating around in terms of really just gifted vision. Kendall Marshall-esque, I think, is easy to say. In this one, he did hit 5 of 10 from 3 over the 3 games, and had a 2.4 to 1 assist ratio. So his turnovers were up there, but I think when you're playing with that type of talent and you're throwing some of those passes, that's going to happen. And that was also one of the learnings from watching him in the 2 games he played over in FIBA. But yeah, it was sensational watching him play, just watching him control the pace, watching him hit players in perfect passing position. At the same time, I think a lot has been brought up about defensively in terms of some concerns given his height, but that was probably one thing that stuck out to me was just he's pretty much a quarterback out there. He's alert. He knows what's going on. He's aware of what other players are doing, where he should be on ball, off ball. He moves his feet extremely quick. That really can frustrate guys when they're out on the perimeter. And he's not afraid to put his chest in front of somebody and take a charge. So I think those are all tremendous signs defensively of what he can bring, despite the size that will be a concern. But he played tremendous. Zayden High, it took him until the championship game to knock down his first field goal. He doesn't get a lot of shots on that team, given some of the talent and some of the usage rates of some of his teammates. So he had he finished 6 points in the championship game, 10 points overall. It was a fairly nondescript tournament for him. I'd say in general, he's definitely a better Will Shaver. We did a lot of work on him in terms of what he brought in the EYBL circuit. And I think being on this team will have helped him probably from his shot selection and just playing with better talent. So definitely not a guy that's going to come in and start right away, but I think, somebody that can potentially offer some minutes off the bench and, hopefully grow. But I know growing is a lot harder in the transfer portal era these days.
Sherrell, just going back to Cadeau's performance, sitting there watching that and seeing some of the stuff he was able to do, I saw a guy that was hitting his teammates in stride. I saw a guy throwing 70-foot pitch aheads like it was nobody's business. And I also saw a guy throwing his teammates open on some plays. Tell me why I'm not overthinking things and why I'm not overvaluing a kid who is 19 years old right now.
Well, in the absence of something, I think we always go looking for it. So, again, follow me on my crazy analogies. But when you hire a football coach, for example, you're usually going to hire and yearn for the thing that you didn't have. So if you had a crazed defensive stalwart who wanted to win games 10-7, you're probably going to hire an offensive savant who wants to win 56-50, just because it's human nature to want what you don't have. And I think for North Carolina, they haven't had that really in quite some time. A player with his passing acumen and basketball IQ and just smoothness. So I think it causes the fan base to be like, wow, look at that. I'm not saying it's not special, but I think that's why, particularly here in the last couple of weeks, that they really gravitated towards the way that he's played. But as far as his skill set and ability, yeah, I mean, it is top notch. It is ready to go. It is something, like we said, we haven't seen at UNC for some time. And to me, what always kind of is the hallmark of a really, really good guard is when they're playing extremely hard and you can't tell. And I think with Cadeau, that's what you see. Like he's playing hard, but it just looks so smooth and so easy and so in control. And North Carolina just hasn't had that. Like we said, I keep saying it over and over. They haven't had that in some time. They haven't had someone who can set teammates up the way he does and see kind of the pass after the pass after the pass, kind of three passes ahead. I'm going to invoke Kendall Marshall because that's the last person they really had, I think, that has this ability at this age. So, yeah, it's just a combination of things that I think has really made UNC fans excited about the way he played. He played phenomenally. I mean, let's not understate that. But I do think there's some of that. It's like, okay, haven't had somebody like that in a while. It'd be fun to have.
Yeah, it's the old stepbrothers. We have so much room for activities, right? Like you just see him and you think about his ability, like you said, to see the floor, to see the pass before the pass before the pass. It's fun to watch, and he looks incredibly calm and confident at the same time doing those things. Sean, what do you think for a player like Cadeau? How much will it improve him when he's playing with better players? And that's not to say, his current roster now at Link has six guys who are Division I commits and some other guys that are top 20 in their respective classes. So I want to ask, with respect to them, how much will it help him when he's got guys that are, again, more experienced, maybe more used to playing in a faster speeded game?
Oh, as you mentioned, right now he's playing with extremely talented high school players, but once again, they're high school guys, and Jacoby, that guy's going to be a beast at Baylor. But even high school guys, it takes them time to develop, whether it's next year in college, or just several years out. And I think he could be playing with guys that have been anywhere from 1 to 5 years in Chapel Hill, and I think just especially guys that are familiar with the offense and have adjusted to that size and speed of college athletics, I think will be extremely helpful. You can see that he is usually a few steps ahead of everybody, and he probably could have had a lot more assists because he was hitting guys, from across the court, right in there, right where they needed to catch it to, catch and shoot very easily. So I think it'll definitely help his game. I think just playing with the Sweden team helped his game. And I think this year at Link Academy has definitely helped. So I think yeah, I know it wasn't a question, but I think of all the people, I'd say myself and Sherrell are usually against reclasses, but I think I've said it on here. I won't speak for Sherrell, but I would certainly be in favor of a reclass, just given all the different, between his age and what he accomplished and what UNC could utilize. I think it definitely makes sense of trying to get 2 years in Chapel Hill rather than 2 years at Lincoln Academy.
So, Sean, let me ask you this, and I'm curious, like what do you think is the hardest thing to do as a freshman coming in to college basketball? What do you think? Like, in college football, it's always with running backs. It's like, oh, can they pass protect? Or with offensive linemen, it's like the physicality. What do you think that is for like a freshman guard?
I mean, definitely the decision making. Under Roy Williams, we always talked about how hard it was for freshman guards,
I was
right?
going to say you can't say figuring out what Roy wants you to do. You can't say that anymore.
But it is a decision. I mean, everybody's quicker, taller. So it's much more challenging. But I also think the harder part is as well scouted as these high school games are right now, and the AAU games, it's obviously 10 times more in college. And once they figure out, hey, what's your weakness, whether that's offensively or defensively, then teams are going to try to attack it. So right now, Cadeau, he can hit the three, but he's not he's not shooting 40% from three. So all of a sudden, if teams aren't respecting him and they start going under, that can make it more challenging for him to show his specialty, which is really turning the corner in the pick and roll, as well as hitting guys. So I think it is decision making, but also getting adjusted to that speed and size of the college game, especially when you're going to have the ball in your hands and be responsible, for what's going on offensively and defensively.
Well, and I asked that because I think his decision making and his basketball IQ are, his greatest strengths. So
Yep.
you would think theoretically the move to college basketball would be a little bit easier for him, considering his greatest strength are the things that most people struggle with when they get to college. So if we're talking about a potential reclass, then I think uh, that would give more hope or more reason for him to go ahead and do it because of those skills.
So
Yeah.
let's see here, Sherrell. I think that's kind of the question everybody's looking at because again, with absence of movement during this dead period, and with UNC having so many gaps in scholarships on the roster right now, uh, let's just kind of reset where things are with not only Elliot Cadeau, but with Ian Jackson's name came up again. Boogie Flan's name has popped back up. Ian Jackson's a potential reclass. So why don't you reset that for everybody as we sit here on April the 2nd?
Well, it came up because Fland and Ian Jackson were both at a USA basketball event down in Houston. It's there every year with the Final Four, wherever that location is. So a bunch of guys who are really talented are invited down there for like a mini camp. So both of them were there, and then Cadeau obviously was at Geico Nationals. And obviously the question is with Jackson and Cadeau is, what are you going to do? And I think they've been fairly consistent. I was a little surprised that people took the most recent answers is kind of new information. But the answer from Cadeau, since the first time we talked to him, was, I think my preference would be to stay in 2024, but I kind of want to make a decision later, see how things look, feel things out. That was even before he committed to UNC. After UNC, it was pretty much, let's see what things look like in, kind of spring, early summer, and reevaluate based on the roster and a few other considerations. So he's been pretty consistent with that. And then Jackson has pretty much said the same thing. I'm staying in 2024 as of right now. That's been his answer since August. And typically, for what we do and how we approach things, if someone mentions reclassing or says they're thinking about it, we kind of treat it as that's the most likely outcome. Um, maybe that's fair, maybe it's not, but that's kind of how we treat it. So we'll see over the next couple of months. Both of those guys have decisions to make, but they haven't changed in what they said over the last 5 or 6 months, even before their Carolina commitments.
All right, so everybody just kind of take that and consider it while you're thinking about who's going to do what in the next few months. Sean, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I think, when we're on the reclass subject, I think, and I see on the message board, I think we've talked about it you have somebody committed that's so far out, and we saw what happened with Gigi Jackson in terms of commit, reclassing up, and I think that is something everybody has to be wary of is you're always going to have other third party voices in people's ears saying, hey, who cares if you're committed to Carolina? Go to school X now, and you're going to be a top 15 pick, and this is what you're going to make, and this is how much you're going to make it. And that's hard to hard to say no to, especially when you think and everybody around you is telling you that, hey, you're a top point guard or top shooting guard. Not to mention all these other coaches, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of voices, and it is nice to get guys in that you have committed. But once again, I think you still need to look at the situations. I'm much more in favor of Cadeau coming up in terms of, I just think the passing ability is special. We saw how how bad UNC struggled in transition, how they struggled to generate really good looks. That's not all on the point guards. There are a lot of other factors at play, but I think Cadeau's passing vision is special. It's not like he is going to Link Academy next year, like James Brown. He's already done it, did that. He's been playing up. He's older, so pretty much everything checks the box. So that's why I would, definitely vote yes for that reclass. Jackson, yes, in terms of does he get him in Chapel Hill versus another year of Rick Pitino trying to recruit him or God knows what else. But at the same time, on the court would concern me in terms of I think it could be a fairly inefficient season by him, just given some of his strengths and weaknesses. But that's all just one person's opinion on those two.
That's good insight, Sean. And again, this is what Sean just laid out are the reasons why I think a lot of fans are intrigued by the thought of Elliot Cadeau coming in early, and why people are kind of at least eyeballing the thought of Ian Jackson coming in, especially with with spaces on the roster. Sherrell, over the last couple of weeks, as guys have been departing the UNC program, and a lot of names are showing up in the transfer portal. You've had the unenviable task of trying to parse things out for our subscribers without violating any of the trust you have with some of your sources, but also giving our subscribers and our listeners, the information that they're looking for in the news and just kind of understanding what's happening. Do you want to try to give a little bit of a synopsis as to why things are the way they are? Just you know me. I'm very much one not to kind of hide what I think about something. But in all honesty, I think the way you guys played the usage of avatars in scenarios with the stories this past week, I think it's brilliant. Like my small brain would not allow for that sort of cunning display of info while also not necessarily going full hypothetical, but letting folks know kind of what's going on. But I think some people may not necessarily understand that wholly. And I'm not trying to rip on anybody's intelligence. I'm just saying I think some people may not get what you're trying to put down there. So I'm going to shut up and allow you the chance to try to reset that and give folks a little bit of a look, into how the sausage is made, into how you report on things like this that not only are moving so much, but just have so many different parts that are speaking into them.
At first, I thought this was going to be the Johnny T-shirt read, so I was preparing like some clever banter
My
about.
goal for a Johnny T-shirt read is for you guys never to know when they're coming.
Okay, that's good. I thought it was gonna be like, oh, they're leaving Carolina, but they're stopping by Johnny T-shirt on their way out to get some more Carolina gear. So yeah, it's difficult because obviously we're in the information business. That's kind of our currency, and that's why, the wonderful listeners and readers subscribe, and that's why we're able to do some of the things that we do. The issue comes in that for every legitimate, three legitimate things we hear, there's probably 15 that turn out to be illegitimate or don't reach the threshold of us being able to report it. From the reporting side, we try to make sure that we have it from more than one trusted source. And people always say, well, an unnamed source wouldn't tell you this or an unnamed source wouldn't tell you that. Well, the reason they're unnamed is because either they probably don't want their name out there or maybe they weren't supposed to tell us, so we had to use unnamed. But the trust relationship that our readers have with us is that we wouldn't call it a trusted source if it wasn't such. So I think that is something that needs to be cleared up. Like that's the reason we kind of report it the way we do. Um, but other people might hear rumors about names, but we're not able to report that again if we can't get it confirmed. So the use of avatars was basically to say, hey, there might be a couple of players that UNC has reached out to that we think they probably have reached out to, but that we can't confirm it based upon our normal standards of reporting, which is the multiple sources. So um, that's one of the reasons we use the avatars. The other is, sometimes recruitments end after one phone call. And so it's kind of like, what's the point of reporting it if we know that there's nothing going to happen? I'll never forget. Let's go down memory lane since UConn's in the national championship game. A center named Alex Oriakhi was at UConn, and this is when it was just grad transfer. That was the only way you could really leave and not sit out. And North Carolina needed a big man, and Roy Williams called Alex Oriakhi one time. I talked to his dad and Alex Oriakhi probably 27 times over the course of a week. And I was like, have you heard from UNC? Have you heard from UNC? No, we're going to hear from him soon. Have you heard from UNC? Have you heard from UNC? And it went on for 5 or 6 days. And we kept doing updates on the message board like, Alex Oriakhi's dad says this, and he says this, and we think it's coming soon. Come to find out, UNC called once and was like, not really interested. And so we have to find the balance of like, being completely transparent about what we know with also not leading the readers down a path that we know is not going to end well for UNC. So it's always weighing that. Me and Ben are always talking, Greg, Ross, the whole team, we're always trying to figure things out, talking to Sean in Slack, so that's kind of how it works. And um, I would say, again, the UNC staff, and really not even the UNC staff, portal recruiting in general is so much more secretive than high school recruiting. These guys, most of the time, have been through one or two, sometimes three recruitments in the past, and they just don't want to deal with it again and don't want to go through what they went through. So they're setting up visits, they're not telling anybody, they're talking to coaches, they're doing Zoom calls, and then, they magically show up to visit somewhere and then they're committed. When we talked to Paxton Wojcik, he was just like, yeah, I just didn't really want to have everything out there. So I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't, uh, leak it to any social media sites. I just went about my business and made a decision. So that's much more how it works in the portal world. And then you couple onto that the fact that North Carolina, as a staff and as a record label and a crew, in general,
Boy,
they don't talk that much really to anyone. They're very quiet and they like to do things in kind of a shadow manner almost. So we add all that together. It's very tough to get information. So when we do, we have to make sure that it's, you know, double, triple, quadruple sourced and make sure that it's airtight. Because if we let a name out, perhaps someone that returned to a certain school, over the last week, if we had reported that they had reached out to that name and it doesn't go well, and then people start creating depth charts and people assume that it's going to happen just because, we said, hey, there might be interest, that can get messy. So we try to take a lot of the guesswork out for the reader when we can, while also being completely transparent. And we recognize that sometimes those two things are at odds. So it's difficult, but we try to do the best we can.
and for folks who are new to Inside Carolina, that's what makes this staff better than any other college site in the world. You can challenge me on that. You can buck me on that if you want to. But I'll put this staff, myself excluded, I'll put this staff up against any other site. And there's a reason other sites get made fun of, because they don't go through the lengths that our reporters go through to confirm information before they report it. Sherrell, do you think it would be safe to say that if a player was recruited or not recruited by UNC the first time for what seemed to be typical red flags, is it safe to say that UNC will probably not pursue that player the second time?
Ah, that was a giant T-shirt read again. He got me again. I think that's safe to say. The caveat being, if you're talking about players from 3 classes ago, it was a different coach.
Right.
So I would just leave that caveat open. But most of the time, yes. Uh, if their recruitment didn't fit what UNC was looking for the first time, more often than not, it's not going to fit the second time.
Sherrell, can you give me an example of when a player may have been in that kind of Alex Oriakhi, who, by the way, the answer to the trivia question, folks, is he finished his career at Missouri, in case anybody forgot. But he finished his career at Missouri. Sherrell, would there be an example of something that might change that trajectory to where maybe it was a one call the first time, and then all of a sudden now the second time that they're looking, as a transfer, now maybe all of a sudden UNC has actually attention? Is it more of recruiting over? Is it there are spots on the roster? Give me an example of where that might have changed, so that now, where it was one call when they were in prep, now it's like, oh, all of a sudden now UNC is interested.
A name people probably aren't going to like, but they remember well, was Austin Rivers. So obviously he didn't go in the transfer portal or anything, but UNC was they were after him, and he played, I think, one or two tournaments with Trevor Lacey for each one teach one. And UNC, Lacey had a huge game in front of UNC, but they never recruited him. I can't remember who exactly they had on the roster at the time. It was somebody good, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, so he went on to Alabama, I believe, and stayed there for a couple of years. And then when he announced he was transferring, Roy Williams was all over it. I mean, they called him, I think, like the night, it wasn't a portal then, but the night he decided he was going to transfer, they called and they were working on visits, and I think a few factors along with his relationship with Mark Gottfried is why he ended up at NC State. But Lacey, I would say, is one of those examples, and nothing particularly changed between, I guess, the initial recruitment and the second one, other than he showed that he was good in college. And UNC really needed a shooting guard that year when he was transferring in, as opposed to the year when he was in high school. So the roster had changed. So I think those are that's one example I can think of off top. I had to think hard about another one, but that's the first one that came to mind.
Well,
That's a Go ahead,
sorry,
John.
just Not exactly, but I mean, I think with so many names in the portal, sometimes it can be as easy as like watching the UConn Miami game. They're talking about Tristan Newton and how does guy from ECU go to UConn and is now playing in the championship game, and then it's pretty much as simple as, hey, do you remember that freshman that scored 25 points on us a few years ago? And then it goes from there. So with so many names, it can also be these little things that stick out and get guys, whether it's UNC or other schools.
It's funny you mentioned Trevor Lacey because the one thing that I think was different between him being the scorer he was at NC State and when he was at Alabama was that he did not go to Johnny Tshirt when he investigated Chapel Hill. I think that were Trevor Lacey to have gone to Johnny Tshirt, he probably would end up being a Tar Heel. And I think most folks are safe to say that. I think most folks would feel confident saying that. And he probably would have scored just as well at Johnny Tshirt with discounts and great prices and selection as he scored at NC State, being a player there. Johnny Tshirt are big friends of this show, big friends of Inside Carolina. We want you all who are listening to the show to be friends of theirs. Baseball season is in full effect. The baseball team is on the road for quite some time, but they will be back, and the weather is officially getting warm. We're officially in April now, so go by and get you some baseball gear. Wear it out to the Bosch. Enjoy a spring day watching some college baseball. And the Diamond Heels are starting to round into form. Tough loss against Coastal recently, but took 2 out of 3 from Notre Dame on the road, and that is a fun bunch to watch. So when you're watching that fun bunch be threaded out the way you're supposed to be from Johnny Tshirt, premium subscribers know you get that extra 10% off the top, and you'll be glad that you've gone to see friends of the show. All right, boys. Let's go ahead and wrap this up because I think we've done, did I say wrap this up? Wrap this show up. Wrap this ish up. Something. Let's end the show. Sean, do you have 2 cents for us?
One, I'm curious to see what's gonna transpire. They've received one commitment, have received one, I guess 2 now official visits with Timberlake and Wojcik, and a lot of people are in the portal. There's been some interest, so just very curious who's going to be coming onto the team. And also
you're basically just like everybody else. Like we're all just sitting here waiting to see, all right, what's next?
Yeah. I'm excited. I think have been watching a few of the guys in terms of I'd say two guys that have kind of jumped out. We've seen a few Big Sky players come out that I think will definitely be playing in Power 5 programs, and Big Sky produces some pretty good, and it's always been guys that have gone to the G League or overseas after they graduate that have done really well over the last 3 to 5 years, and I think now we're going to be able to see that talent emerge at Power 5 schools. So don't sleep on the Big Sky Conference.
I thought you were making a really bad segue to mentioning Harold the Show Arsenault. Weber State's still Big Sky, right?
I believe so.
All right.
And yeah, I think that's it. Going back to Elliot Cadeau, potentially have something out this week on him, but there's plenty of highlights that exist out there to go watch some of that passing that went on this week. And once again, it was against 3 extremely talented teams at the highest level of high school. So I think it was fun watching him and seeing him in the news as well as UNC in a positive light.
Yeah, my man Moran makes a great point there. If y'all haven't seen that video, it's pretty widely circulated. You can find it on the Inside Carolina message boards. There's been a couple of threads where people shared it, but it's good footage, and it will get you excited about Cadeau's skill set. If nothing else, just because it's him playing against top level competition, just looking really good doing it. Sherrell, you got 2 pennies for me?
One quarter, I would say.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I don't have change for that, sir.
Yeah. I'm going to call this like the talking points portion of the program because I think we're probably going to say the same thing over the next few weeks. So one of my lines that I've liked to say is that the transfer portal is simultaneously a marathon and a sprint. And I think that's difficult because it's uncomfortable for North Carolina fans to have a roster this with this much uncertainty, in April of the year before. Carolina has been known as kind of the school up until the transfer portal, really a couple of years ago, that didn't have people leave because they loved the UNC, they loved Roy Williams, they loved to develop at the school. And now that kind of everything that's been impacting the rest of college basketball is impacting UNC, it's creating nervousness amongst the fan base. And I'm not judging it for that because I think it's valid and it's understood. But I would say that you have to have a little patience with this. Dating all the way back to what we talked about a couple of years ago, you don't know who's going to enter the portal and you don't know when they're going to enter the portal. They have to be in by May 12th, and that's really all you know. Someone on the roster who they think is coming back could be like, you know what, I changed my mind, I'm leaving. Or someone on a really good team could say, this is not the situation for me, and decide they want to go. And then there's a player you can go look for. If you look at the dates of the commitments that UNC has gotten from the transfer portal since Hubert Davis has become the head coach, Paxton Wojcik actually is the earliest. Now, obviously, North Carolina was playing for a week after Wojcik's commitment, a year prior. But it's the earliest commitment they had. They had two players officially visit in the last week, and because everything is moving so fast, I'm snapping my fingers. People kind of think that nothing's happening. And I would say again, consider North Carolina and how quiet they are about things. So just because you guys don't know it or we don't know it doesn't mean that nothing's happening. They're not, I promise you, they're not just sitting in the Smith Center, kind of twiddling their fingers, looking at the big screen, trying to figure out the meaning of life. They're actively searching, they're actively talking to people. They're just choosing to some degree not to share it. So there's that. And then just remember, Brady Manek committed, I believe it was April 16th. Justin McCoy, I believe it was like April 10th. Pete Nance was, I think, the day before Father's Day, so like June 18th. And Dustin Garcia was like July 7th or something. So that's why I say it's simultaneously a marathon and a sprint, because you have to look at players now, but you have to also look at, potentially guys who might come in the portal later, who might go to the G League invite camps, who might go to the draft combine. And then if that wasn't enough, you also have to consider these reclasses. So in the absence of something happening, don't think nothing is happening, would be what I would tell everyone, because things are happening. They're trying, and we'll see where it goes. But I think the best course of action, as I've said before, is to think about the plan and not judge the individual pieces until it's a whole. Then you can judge the whole instead of the individual pieces. So let's have a conversation on June 15th or July 1st. And then we can say, you know what, they didn't do a good job in the portal, or yes, they did a good job in the portal. But right now, there's too many moving parts to make that, declaration either way.
It's a great way to end the show. And you didn't even mention the fact that, there's money now openly, right? Like there's money now involved with NIL that is legal. So that also changes things. But in the spirit of getting out of here, that was a great way to wrap the show, Sherrell. We appreciate you. You and Sean always bring so much to it. I'm sure our listeners are grateful to hear from you guys on a regular basis. I am thankful for everybody who listened to the show, everybody who's subscribed. If you have not, please do so. I gave you some time earlier in the show. You're not going to get any more time. So you got to do it after you finish today. But special shout out to Sherrell and Sean for being a part of the show as always. To John Siegley for producing. We appreciate John making the show happen and getting to your feeds. And to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring, because we don't do any of this without their support. So in essence of time and me running out of things to say, why don't we just wrap the show and we'll get out of here. Catch you all next time on the Coast to Coast podcast from InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell.